135 AD was an uprising of a man named Bar Kokhba, claimed to be the Messiah, had a following, and for 3 years were battling the Romans. They were officers in the Herodia. They dug out of the marl, and that was where their headquarters were. They found 3 years of coins, coin 1, 2, 3. And when the Romans put them down, it was under Hadrian. And Hadrian was so unhappy with the Jews that he tore the whole city down of Herod and started over. And from that time, he wouldn't allow it to be called Jerusalem. It was called the Ia Capitolina, capital of, and I'm not sure what the Latin term was, but so the place was completely covered. Well, he built right at this spot a Aphrodite goddess, and he filled it all in with dirt first so he could get it made. And Eusebius from Caesarea, the first bishop, who was also a great historian, born in 240, died in 360. He was 80 years old, so he may have it a little off, but he was the historian without which we would not know where many of the cities were. He came here, and he said that when they were digging all of that dirt out of the temple of Aphrodite, they found the spot where Jesus was crucified. And on his authority, and then the Church of Constantine began in 326. And it was 60 years later that was finally finished. So this is the Crusader Church. There wasn't a church before that, but there was what was there in Herod's time isn't clear, but it's thought to have been the same place that this stone abandoned quarry was. And this is where the wealthy would seek to build. Right outside of, then, it's still in, but right outside of the Jaffa Gate, so that the mass of people going by would see this suffering. And of course, you know, they did not hang them on a cross as it shows Jesus was, but they flexed their legs real tight and pulled the heels up so that the body could rest on the heels. And an easy way to break the legs with an uppercut because the legs were folded. And the one sacrificial man that was found, about 13, 18 miles northwest of Jerusalem, had his heels back on one side and one nail going through both heels into the cross. Sometimes they did it on both sides. Sometimes they only brought the crossbar. Jesus, in that case, would have carried the crossbar, and then standing on the ground would have been impaled, then the legs brought up. They didn't climb up, as is generally shown, and hang them that way, but simply standing so that you're looking at the person suffering rather than way up in the air. And this bending them up made it die longer because you are resting on your heels. You're not your whole body being held by your nails. The nails on both instances were in his wrists, not in the hand. That was all part of the hand. So that's the only crucified person that's been found. It's in that book that I told you about you can get tomorrow at the Garden Tomb, Living in the Time of Jesus. Just a small book, very well illustrated. I highly recommend it. But this has all the authority all the way back to Eusebius before Constantine's mother came. But the church was started in 326 and was built by the end of 60 years later. So I remember when I began to come here, this church was about to collapse. They had a massive metal structure in front of it. And finally they got together enough because all of the denominations have almost fought between themselves over the territory. They hire a Muslim to open and close the door to this day. But it's the Orthodox, the Catholics, and their chapels are right together up on top of this would be the Golgotha, the solid outcropping of bedrock. I'm recommending that they're standing here at the door. You turn immediately and you go up the stairs to on top of Golgotha. The first one is the Roman Catholic side, and then with no division, the Orthodox side. The Orthodox have a table, and you'll see them getting under and reaching through and touching the Golgotha rock, the solid rock. All of that is solid rock, and then kissing their hands, so they're more elaborate in their veneration. There is this, right under that metal structure, a stone of unction, they call it, where it is thought Jesus was taken off the cross, laid on the stone, and prepared for burial. And that stone of unction is the holiest site to the Orthodox. They will kneel, they will take scarves they've bought, or the purses, or whatever, they rub it over the stone, they put rose water on it occasionally. I've even read they've had to replace that stone many times, but it's thought to be where he would have been dressed for burial. But on top of Golgotha up there, there's no soil, but there is a massive crack that you can see all the way to the bottom. When you come down the stairs on the other side, you can see where that they've got it in glass, a massive break, and that was the earthquake that happened when Jesus was crucified. Then the prepared for burial, and then the burial spot is back around, and usually 5 or 10 deep. It's completely around it, the outside of the tomb, and all it is, it's not the cenotaph attempt as they would slide a body in that would have been in Jesus' time, but rather just cut open so that there is a marble layer, and there is a column with a little glass, and that's supposed to be part of the rolling stone. That's all that's left of it. So you go into the first room and then into the room where he was laid. All of that, it was in 1926-27 that there was an earthquake here and nearly destroyed the 1808 marble casing around the top of his tomb. And so it's all held up by I-beams, metal I-beams. So there was a wealthy Greek Orthodox man that died and left quite a sum to make that picture in mosaic, very expensive mosaic, on that wall. You see him on the cross, they're taking him down, they lay him on the platform, and then they take it back to his burial. Behind his burial is some of those caves carved, where it's thought Joseph of Arimathea and his family were buried. And it's the true kind, because all of them was carved out of stone, made with the floor, and then the body put in, feet first, and sealed. And a year later, someone comes and prepares the body, taking away all of the flesh that's left, and putting it in the stone box, and storing it back inside. Oh, sorry. I can. Okay. I'm sorry. Have you been hearing me or not? Oh, my. Okay, so let's start over. It's my fault, not yours. Hadrian razed the city, tore it all down. So angry the Jews were too difficult to control. And as a result, he literally started over, although the bedrock and the big stones I don't think he would pull up to put back down. What we were working on of original, I think, would be Herod's time. But this is 135 years after Jesus was born, 135 years, at 135 AD, that there was an uprising of a man called Bar Kokhba, claimed to be the Messiah, had quite a following, and there was an uprising against the Romans. And so it was successful for 3 years, and then finally he fled, and I guess he escaped, I'm not sure. But at that time, Hadrian razed the city, tore it down completely, and then he built on this spot a temple of Aphrodite. Well, Eusebius, now this was the 135, Eusebius, who was born 260 AD, lived to 340 AD, 80 years old. That's the geographer that lived in Caesarea, came here, and they were excavating it. Aphrodite was gone, and they were moving the fill, and they found, he said, they found the place of Jesus' burial. So Constantine, 326, starts the church here. But his Eusebius identification, as well as the mother of Constantine, but Eusebius was more the authority, being the ancient geographer that wrote the Onomasticon, says that they dug a hole and found the burial of Jesus in this solid rock. And so they start to build it, Constantine, 326, and 60 years later, 386, it was completed. That's what the church dates from. So it was destroyed in 1008 by the Muslim, rebuilt 1100 BC by the Christian Crusades, and it's now occupied by Greek Orthodox, by Armenians, by Roman Catholic, by about 6 or 7 denominations, and they struggle over the parts that belong to them. The Orthodox have the biggest, of course, a huge chapel, and the big dome is under their part. The Egyptians are in a little huddle right behind the place, but we do have a good flashlight, and I doubt we're going to see the tomb. It would be a long wait probably, but Terry's got a flashlight, and I'm going to stand behind the tomb, and if you think the line is too big to wait in, you can come and we can go see it, and where the actual tomb that he would have been, kind of tomb that Jesus would have been laid in, is there. And there's then you get inside and you see 2 more. They're all empty, but that's the kind of burial he would have had in Joseph of Arimathea's house. And that he was wealthy. You had to be wealthy to buy one of these cut in the stone types of burial.
The ladder?
Dr. Williams, just 2 things. Just to make something clear, because I was confused by this when I came to visit for my first time. Both Golgotha and the tomb are in this church, and they're only separated by
a few steps.
Yeah. So both are in here, and that's, I think, easily confused on a first visit.
But it's all bedrock. See?
Yeah. The second thing is, and I talked to my group before we came, I called it blinking, where you're at a place, it doesn't look like you expect, it doesn't look like you want, and you got to blink. The number one example of this to me is what they have on the hilltop here, and I just want to encourage you to see past all of the gaudy things that they have up there, and this is, or as Joel talked about the spot the other day, this is one of those moments, and do your best to do it, because there's a lot to visually see there. It's also very hard to talk inside the church, so as far as hearing a lecture from Dr. Williams. Now, I want to ask you to explain the ladder, which I think is such an interesting...
I don't know the entire history, but I know that they were fighting over who controls what. And the ladder was used, but it became a symbol of their division. And so they agreed at one time to stop. And no changes, and nobody has retrieved the ladder because they're not to come out of their section. Basically, that's it. So
but it's been a couple hundred years, hasn't it?
Yeah, right. And so
that ladder's been leaning against the wall a couple hundred years.
Yeah, and they now have to have a Muslim to lock and unlock the church. They can't even agree who can have the keys. A bad testimony for Christianity, but
a great sermon illustration.
Oh, yeah. And realize that inside nearly everything is rebuilt. You'll find some stones that were original, but it was so near collapse that finally they raised the money from Orthodox and Catholic Church to redo the columns and to recarve the Corinthian capitals. And they put in a solid block, and then the carving was done. I saw it after they put in the blocks. So nearly all of the inside of it is brand new stone. It was supported since 1100, something like that. The Crusaders built it, but afterwards, it had been here so long that they had to redo the interior of it. Took quite a while, but now it's in good repair. So now, again, go in, try to go up the stairs right around to the right, and you'll go in first to the Roman Catholic side. You cross over, and all of this is the outcropping of bedrock. They have altars over it. And the one next is the Orthodox Church, and they're more ornate with all of the candles coming down from the roof and the smell of incense and all. Come down the stairs on the other side, come back a little, and underneath Golgotha, there is a window that shows the result of the earthquake that happened, and then the stone of unction where his body was placed, and then the tomb is back to the left. And if you join, it'll have to be at the end of the movement. So I'll be down at the bottom here, and I will take people around the back to see the kind of tomb he would have been laid in. And it's still there and would have been the kind maybe that Joseph himself was buried in.
But it's empty.
Till which time? And people are kneeling down under the altar. There is an opening from which, when you put hand in the opening, you touch the rock of Golgotha. And this is what these Russian Orthodox are doing, waiting each one for the turn. They go under the altar. You see them going under the altar. Under the altar, they put the hand in the hole. They touch the rock of Golgotha. This is Golgotha. This is how it looked like then. When Jesus was on the cross, his mom and son John, they were standing next to him. You read the scriptures. Okay? Do you know what you are looking at? This is the place.
Garden tomb versus the tomb here. What's that difference?
Okay. Well, when they discovered it, and because there was also the graves cut into the rock, and mainly because one of the rocks, it had the features of the skull, they started to believe that maybe this was the place, because Golgotha means skull. So they said, oh, here is an image of skull, maybe it was here, okay? But believe me, all the world believe in this place. There is no way that in 1850 or 60 somebody discovered graves and people worshipping for 1500 years, wrong place. No way. You can go. Here you see the crack in the rock.
Oh, yes.
Above us is Golgotha, where people were touching in the hole the bedrock. And it just come till here. This is the crack. Just above me is the Golgotha, where you could see in the silver cross and Mary and Son John next to the cross. That's the place. This is the bedrock, and here you see the crack.
Is it down here as well?
Yeah. This is all bedrock. It is carved in the bedrock. You can see.
It's the place of the crucifixion.
What is this film?
Две очереди. Да, отсюда и оттуда. Вы делаете две очереди. Мы не можем стоять красиво. Пожалуйста, две очереди. Видите, две очереди. Делали две очереди с двух сторон. Вы опалили?
Looks like a rock.
This, if you look here, let me see. See here, that's what Jesus, there are two there
Yes.
that are made. So this would be like where he was buried.
Okay.
Does that have a flash?
No.
Two maybe.
We want to take a picture here?